the American period, and the colonial literature. The colonial period was dominated by Puritan beliefs, and thus the literature of this period is usually historical, religious, or didactic. The first slave narratives were written at this time. Imaginative literature was rare. In some colonies, it was banned for being immoral. Colonial period 1620 to 1750. Newly arrived colonists create villages and towns and establish new governments, while protesting the old ways in Europe did not consider themselves Americans until the mid-18th century. Enormous displacement of Native American civilization, literature of the period, dominated by Puritans and their religious influence, emphasis is on faith in one's daily life. A person's faith is determined by God, and all corrupt and needed a savior nature is a revelation of God's providence and power. Puritan work ethic believe in hard work and simple, no frills living. The writing in this period is utilitarian, and writers are amateurs or not professional writers. As emphasis, the writing of this period is utilitarian. Writers are amateurs or not professional writers. The writing is instructive, like sermons, diaries, and personal narratives. As such, Puritan plain style is simple and direct. Examples of genre in novels include the realistic fiction, romance, suspense, and literary fiction. One of the notable authors in the colonial period is Jonathan Edwards, 1703 to 1758. Jonathan Edwards is widely acknowledged to be the America's most important and philosophical theologian. His work as a whole is an expression of two themes: the absolute sovereignty of God and the beauty of God's holiness. The first is articulated in Edwards' defense of theological determinism, in a doctrine of occasionalism, and his insistence that physical objects are only collection of sensible ideas, while finite minds are mere assemblages of thoughts or perceptions, as the only real cause or substance underlying physical and mental phenomena. God is, being in general, the sum of all being. The second theme of Edward is articulated in accounts of God's end in creation and of the nature of true virtue and a true beauty. God creates in order to manifest a holiness which consists in a benevolence which alone is truly beautiful. Genuine human virtue is an imitation of divine benevolence, and all finite beauty is an image of divine loveliness. True virtue is needed to discern this beauty, however, and to reason rightly about divine things. Edwards' projected history of redemption would have drawn these themes together, for it is in his redemptive work in his history that God's sovereignty, holiness, and beauty are most clearly exhibited. In addition, Edwards played a critical role in shaping the First Great Awakening and oversaw some of the first revivals in 1730 to 35 at his church in Northampton, Massachusetts. His theological work gave rise to a distinct school of theology known as the New England theology. Some of his remarkable quotes are: "Prayer is a natural an expression of faith as breathing is of life." Second one is, "Of all knowledge that we can ever obtain, the knowledge of God and the knowledge of ourselves are the most important." The second notable authors in this period: Benjamin Franklin, 1703 to 1790. Benjamin Franklin was born and raised in colonial Boston, Massachusetts in the waning years of Puritan hegemony. From 1733 to 1758, he wrote and published Poor Richard's Almanac, significant for its hundreds and popular maxims in the creation of Richard Saunders, its fictional author. The writing style of Benjamin Franklin was pragmatic, clear, in plain with a self-deprecating tone. He used declarative sentences as Puritan writers did. He also wrote several poems. Franklin began his career as a writer when he was apprenticed to his brother, James Franklin, for whom he wrote his first published work, Grub Street Ballads. Having got taste for writing, Franklin went on to submit articles to his brother's newspaper under the pseudonym of a widow Silence Do-Good. Pseudonymity concealed his identity in case from his own brother, and it's also enabled him to experiment with the multiple identities that could be constructed through fictional voices. Ben Franklin taught himself to write with a few clever tricks. When Benjamin Franklin was a boy, he yearned for a life at sea. To do so, he collected issues of British culture and politics magazine, The Spectator, which featured some of the best writing of his days, and reverse-engineered the prose. And what is the purpose of the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin? He is remembered as one of America's most influential founding fathers. The purpose of the autobiography at first was to show his son or anyone how even in a bad situation, a person can improve their lives and avoid mistakes. Later, it was to show that all he did and all that he was involved in. One of the foremost of the founding fathers, Franklin also helped draft the Declaration of Independence and was one of its signers, represented the United States and France during the American Revolution, and was a delegate to a constitutional convention. Undeniably, that Benjamin Franklin did contributed a lot in the world, most especially on his inventions. But above all, Benjamin Franklin provide maxims just like Confucius that renders value and lesson that society must ponder into. Some of his famous quotations: "Well done is better than well said," and "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn." It was all from Benjamin Franklin. This is Rodin Fernandez Manliguez. Thank you for listening.